So, ladies and gentlemen, the 2025 Ballon d'Or winner is Ousmane Dembele. He has officially won the 2025 Ballon d'Or. And look, obviously as a Barca fan, I'm a little bit gutted for Lamine Yamal. He was one of, obviously as Barca fans, we wanted to see him win the award. And, some fans, obviously, they took it to heart. Some people didn't. But I'm here to basically share my thoughts on the Ballon d'Or ceremony and, what do I think of, Lamine Yamal losing out to Ousmane Dembele in the end. And look, obviously, like I mentioned, Barca fan here, right? I wanted to see Lamine Yamal win the Ballon d'Or and he didn't. But I'm going to keep it 100 with you guys, right? Do I believe that Ousmane Dembele was the rightful winner of the Ballon d'Or, to be honest with you? I think, honestly, if I took my bias aside, I think Dembele was the rightful winner. The right man won the Ballon d'Or, right? Lamine Yamal, incredible he was last season, right? He deserved to be in that podium. He deserved to be second. He really, really worked hard. And he was one of the best players in the world and deserves to be where he was in the podium. But in the end, like I mentioned, Ousmane Dembele did win the Ballon d'Or. And look, obviously, I'm not someone who really rates the Ballon d'Or as much anymore because I feel like the Ballon d'Or just became this thing where it was a popularity contest, right? It was less about individual performances and more about how many trophies you win and not individually what you contributed to that team. As long as, you were the best player in your team that basically won everything, you were guaranteed the Ballon d'Or, not because of your performances, right? And for many, obviously, some biased Barca fans, they're going to look at this and say, well, that's the same thing that happened this year, right? The only reason why Dembele won the Ballon d'Or is because of PSG's great season. But I feel it's deeper than that, right? And I'm going to give you guys my honest insight because I believe the Ballon d'Or ceremony, the Ballon d'Or winner, the person who deserves to win it is the guy who individually, his performances was one of the best in the world. He was at a league of his own. Where everybody else was inconsistent, he was the top dog in the world in his position. I believe that's what the Ballon d'Or should be. It should acknowledge the best player in the world individually. Now, there's so many players in the world who stand out in being the best, right? I think that every elite club can say their player deserves to win the Ballon d'Or if that is what the criteria of being a Ballon d'Or winner is. And that now takes me to the second criteria of being a Ballon d'Or winner. In my eyes, what did your individual performances contribute to your club's success? Did your contributions individually elevate your club from being nearly men to taking them to the promised land? And when you look at Yamal and Ousmane Dembele, these two men were two players whose performances elevated their clubs to different levels that many people in the world did not expect to see them last season. Let's start with Lamine Yamal. Lamine Yamal came back to Barcelona last season in the 24-25 season as a European champion. His performances were incredible, and his performances took us from being a team that were nowhere near Real Madrid in the title race in the 23-24 season, nowhere near one of the favorites in the Champions League, to this past season, potentially winning a quadruple. We completely swept the domestic league. We were 90 seconds away from a Champions League final. We had it all in our hands. We were incredible. We were one of the most entertaining, one of the most dangerous teams in the whole of Europe last season. And Lamine Yamal was a main contributor to why we were where we were last season. But in the end, all of those performances brought us 3 trophies, domestic trophies. Now let's look at the guy who just won the Ballon d'Or. Ousmane Dembele took over the PSG team right after their best player walked out the door. They took over. They had a slow start to their season. And when Ousmane Dembele finally found his feet, he dragged that PSG team and took them to one of the best runs in the entirety of Europe. They were the scariest team in the entirety of Europe. They were free scoring. They were absolutely dangerous. They looked like they could smash everybody. No one was safe from this PSG team. And in the end, his individual performances ended up elevating his team to a league title, to the Cup of France trophy, but most importantly, his individual performances, specifically in the Champions League, brought his club the first Champions League in their history. That is what Dembele's individual performances brought him. He elevated his club, who had just watched their best player leave, and actually elevated them. That is what Dembele did. And in the end, when you look at it in that perspective, Yamal did all the job that he did was in the domestic trophies. Yes, he worked so hard in the Champions League, Yamal. And it's not his fault we didn't make it to the Champions League final. Trust me, he's one of the biggest contributors to why we were even that close to reaching the Champions League final. But in the end, blame whatever you want. We did not reach the Champions League final. We did not give ourselves a shot of winning it on the final. Dembele, from the knockout rounds, has been on a dangerous form. He scored in the round of 16, he scored in the quarterfinals, and he scored in the semifinals. He was carrying that PSG team throughout that Champions League round. And because of that, I genuinely believe it was very close. That's why I was looking at it, I was like, listen, whichever one of these players wins it, they deserve it. I think that if Yamal won it, yes, there were going to be some PSG fans that were going to feel hard down by it. Let's be honest, some other football fans, Madrid fans, their biasness is never going to allow them to accept that Yamal deserved to win the Ballon d'Or. But in the end, Dembele winning it, I think it's deserved. He had an individual season just as good as Lamine Yamal. But in the end, his individual season brought the trophies that mattered. So I'm not against Dembele winning the Ballon d'Or. And look, obviously we all know Ousmane Dembele is a former Barca player. And it's great. You know, that's one thing I will say I'm happy about, right? Former Barcelona player winning the Ballon d'Or. And listen, he was very, very respectful during his ceremony, right? When they were asking him, right? During his what's the word I'm looking for? Basically when he was in the podium, right? And this is what he basically said. Ousmane Dembele was very, very humble and respectful in his press con when he was asked. When they asked him about Barcelona and about Messi, he even said it. He said, I want to thank Barca, the club of my dreams. I also played with Messi. I want to thank them, and I learned a lot. And I learned so much from them. Now look, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm not going to lie. If any of you guys have been someone who's been a long time subscriber, you know I have a love-hate relationship with Dembele, right? I think that Dembele was one of those players who was very frustrating. When he was fit, he looked like one of the best wingers in the world. And for many years when he was at Barcelona, he struggled with injuries, right? Obviously not fault of his, right? That injuries are part of the game. He looked like he finally found his feet when Xavi was in charge. Finally, it looked like Dembele had finally found his feet. But in the end, just when he found his feet, he left. And for me, as a Barca fan, it left a huge sour taste in my mouth, right? Seeing Dembele leave, right? Because I felt like, you know, we had supported him during his injury-plagued years, and when he finally found his feet, he decided to leave us hanging. And I never let that go. For a long time, I really held that resentment towards Ousmane. But in the end, I think the right person won the Ballon d'Or. Now, before we do end, I'm going to just talk about the Ballon d'Or ceremony in general, right? Obviously, we saw some other awards. PSG won the best team in Europe. Also, the female Ballon d'Or winner, Bonatti, for the Barcelona Femini won his third Ballon d'Or. Only Messi and Van Basten are the only two players that have ever won the Ballon d'Or 3 times. Congratulations to her as well. Lamine Yamal also won the Copa Trophy, being the first person to win, I think, back-to-back or 3 times, right? I don't even know, right? But yeah, he won it as well. Obviously, Donnarumma won Best Goalkeeper. We saw a lot of like awards. Luis Enrique winning the Best Coach. So I was very, very happy. Now, I have to talk about the top 30 rankings because I don't have time to talk about all of them. But there's a few things I need to get off my chest. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, Rafinha finished 5th in the Ballon d'Or. He finished 5th. The guy who basically was the top goal scorer, top goal assister in top goal scorer, top assister in the Champions League, right? Best player in La Liga, right? Put over 50 GA. One of the best winners in the there was people putting him as the Ballon d'Or winner. For many people were actually saying he was going to win it. He didn't even make top 3. He finished 5th. He finished behind Salah and Vitinha. Now look, I think Vitinha last season was the best midfielder in the world. I personally think it was Pedri, but I hear when people said he was the best midfielder in the world. But did he deserve to be in the top 3? I'm sorry. I think that should have been Rafinha. I'm sorry. There's no way Salah should be finishing ahead of Rafinha. I'm sorry, he doesn't. In fact, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I think the Barca players, we were shafted in this entire Champions League. In this Ballon d'Or, we were actually shafted because how did Cole Palmer finish 8th and Pedri, who I just said was the best midfielder in the world, finished 11th? Please make it make sense. Make it make sense to me. How is that even possible? Harry Kane finished 13th and Lewandowski finished 17th. How did Lewandowski finish 17th in the Ballon d'Or? Honestly, bro, right? There's going to be a lot of Barca fans who are going to feel like this whole Ballon d'Or ceremony we were shafted. Because many people are going to say Yamal should have won it. Some people are also going to say Rafinha should have finished top 3. Right? Pedri should have definitely been top 10. This is absolutely ridiculous. I think that this Ballon d'Or ceremony this year, right? Obviously, the right person won it. I'm not gonna take that away. But the rest of the other Barca players, we got shafted throughout this Ballon d'Or. How? Bro, trust me, man. That's the one thing I will say. And look, that's the one thing about the Ballon d'Or, bro, that really pisses me off. This is why I don't rate the Ballon d'Or ceremony anymore. Because, you know what, right? Yeah, they got the Ballon d'Or winner right, which is rare, right? Sometimes they don't get it right sometimes. But, bruh, you put in the top 30 and you've got players like Vinicius finishing ahead of guys like Lewandowski. Vinicius finished 16th, guys. Vinicius Jr. finished 16th in the Ballon d'Or, ladies and gentlemen, over Lewandowski. That's all I have to say. That's the last thing I'm going to say, guys. Let me know what you guys are saying in the comment section below. Make sure you guys smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. And let me know, guys, do you think Yamal deserved the Ballon d'Or more than Dembele? Let me know what you guys are saying about that. Make sure you guys smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. And yeah, ladies and gentlemen, Visca el Barça, Visca el Catalonia, and peace, you guys. Take care.